Enclosing more than 18 acres and 194 million cubic feet of air, the Tropical Islands Resort is currently the largest uninterrupted volume in the world, the largest indoor water park in the world, and the container of the world's largest indoor rainforest. Located in the sparse municipality of Krausnick-Großwasserburg, 30 miles south of Berlin, Germany, the resort was built inside a former blimp hangar in 2004 and has been in successful operation since opening day. In an era marked by serious debate concerning climate change, material scarcity and the conflicts of globalization, the Tropical Islands Resort reveals a crucial link between architectural design and the public response to some of the greatest challenges facing contemporary society. As it reflects popular attitudes towards the climate, nature and culture, the existence and popularity of the Tropical Islands Resort begs the question: how has the architectural interior become a tool for aesthetic mediation in the 21st century, and what are its precedents? Chapter 1: The Bunker Bubble. Between Community and Immunity. The air we breathe, which, in the Western tradition, has long been the ethereal subject of our surroundings, our atmosphere, and our space, can no longer be described under such stable terms. Sampling from any coordinate on Earth reveals that human influence has left the air a mixed and unbalanced soup spanning continents. In response to the apparent contamination of the air, the gas mask was invented by Louis Haslet in 1849 and patented as a lung protector. The bottom half acts as an air filter for immunization, while the top half provides the opportunity for communication with the outside world. In the 20th century, the gas mask became a model for two types of the architectural interior. Those concerned about the selective weaponization of the air, as it was initially practiced in the First World War, developed architectures of pure immunization in response. Bunkers, such as J. Swayze's underground homes of 1964, were modeled after a single-story suburban home, entirely designed to distract its occupants from the potential threats of the Cold War happening above ground. But while a significant portion of the population was ready to bury themselves underground, a number of architects imagined new social ecologies suspended above the earth and sustained within vast interiors to mitigate their reliance on natural resources. A climate-controlled modern air, after all, meant potentially implementing a new system of human commerce and everyday experience, from the visual landscape to the potential new role of agriculture within society. Among the most influential was Buckminster Fuller's Cloud9 project of 1960. His intentions can be summarized by one of his own poems. To make the world work, in the shortest possible time, through spontaneous cooperation, without ecological offense, or the disadvantage of anyone. The distinction between the two interior types is a political one, between pastiche opacity and futuristic transparency, between short-term and long-term solutions, and between paranoiac individualism and ambitious communitarianism. Though, ultimately, it is their respective levels of success in entering the consumer market that marks their greatest difference. The projects that belong to the first group demonstrate relatively little trouble with funding, typically supported by investors including the 1964 World's Fair and nervous billionaires, when compared to those of the second, which have generally gained little traction beyond the media of exhibition, drawing, art piece and critique. Bunkers are financed by the fearful, bubbles are hidden away in textbooks. The Tropical Islands Resort is a manifestation of the two main responses to the environmental crisis. The Tropical Islands Resort is a bunker bubble. Looking below the horizon line, Tropical Islands plays into nearly every technique of pastiche and escapism imaginable. Looking above, it can be mistaken for one of the cloud structures Fuller never dreamed would exist in his lifetime. Though the membrane is in stark contrast to nearly everything below it, the resort's operators have since made no attempt to conceal it. No blue paint to resemble the sky that surrounds it. No pixel or projection screen to operationalize its resort-wide visibility. The structural membrane, as a final remnant of its former role as a blimp hangar, is decidedly left intact. Intact, that is, except for the 44 transparent ultraviolet-coated PVC panels that were installed to replace the southern section of the membrane's metal structure, allowing a generous amount of sunlight throughout the day. If the sky over Germany lost its color, so too would its interior. Though it is an immunological bubble of the highest technical ability, it still maintains a relationship to the world around it. If the tropical islands resort is a sign of things to come, given the looming volatility of the climate, it is somewhat assured that the future will not be strictly made up of bunkers, nor of bubbles. Chapter 2, The Botanical Spectacle. Between Conservation and Consumption. In the wake of climate change and the contamination of the air, the unintended human occupation of geologic agent has quickly made itself apparent. Nature, that timeless and scaleless concept beyond human comprehension, has recently been given timely and spatial limitations in the clumsy hands of society. Their confluence is most apparent in the history of the greenhouse building type, a site of both botanical protection and spectacle. The first greenhouse was created in 30 AD as a mobile cart, for the year-round growth of a cucumber-like vegetable for the ailing Roman Emperor Tiberius. Moved out into the sun and withdrawn under the cover of frames on wintry days, the first greenhouse was as much about the conservation of nature as its consumption. In the 19th century, the parallel advancements of ironwork and glass production transformed the greenhouse into an interiorized environment against the apparently polluted London atmosphere. Explorers voyaged to faraway countries both colonized and unpopulated, to bring back the seeds of plants only heard about in stories or seen in illustrations. For the first time in history, specimens from around the world could be kept under single, uninterrupted glass roofs for public viewing and close botanical scholarship. By the turn of the 20th century, botanical study and museological pleasure had become the two inseparable roles of greenhouse production. Much like how zoos transitioned in this era from collecting to preserving animals, so too did greenhouse design and the environmental education offered within begin to suggest an appeal to ecological concerns. The list of amenities for the Climatron, the world's first air-conditioned greenhouse system built in 1961, reads more like that of an amusement park. Meanwhile, the office interior was imagined as a corporate greenhouse, in an effort to bring nature closer, to give the person who spends most of their time in an office a more habitable environment. In the urban atrium, nature is both the subject of immense appreciation and the highly resilient plaything of technical intervention. The end of the 20th century was met with the world's largest earth science experiment set up in the Arizona desert. 4 men and 4 women were sealed inside an 8-story simulation of the Earth's biomes at a scale 39 billion times smaller than its referent. Known as biospherians, they were regularly interviewed, televised and even put on display for tourists during the 2-year experiment. Though it had investors lined up from space travel and environmental management industries, Biosphere 2 was ultimately designed to be a media sensation. The tropical islands resort is, like nearly every greenhouse preceding it, a celebration of the human triumph over the material world, the insatiable quest for botanical and zoological comprehension, and the tension between human history and natural history that, to this day, continues to be deeply unresolved and in many cases willfully overlooked. The tropical islands resort is a botanical spectacle.